Welcome to Diplomacy Podcast. Today I'm going to talk about the quiet war regarding influence operations and Europe's new security order. What if the most dangerous weapon shaping Europe's future isn't a missile or even a line of malicious code, but a story that slips into your feed while you wait for the bus? A story that sounds like your neighbor, that borrows your frustrations, that feels like common sense, and that quietly alters how you vote, whom you trust, and what you consider possible. Influence operations thrive in that intimate space between information and identity. They rarely invent divisions. They exploit the ones already there: language, history, regional inequality, the price of a heating bill, the memory of an empire. To understand Europe's security today, we have to understand the politics of these stories and the way they intersect with energy, trade corridors, defense institutions, and the evolving role of countries like Turkey in a security order that is being rebuilt in real time. Influence operations are coordinated efforts, often state backed, to tilt perceptions and nudge outcomes without overt coercion. They can look like crude propaganda, but more often they are subtler. A forged memo that surfaces at the worst possible moment, a local Facebook page that changed owners last week, a documentary channel that starts with folklore and ends with geopolitical agitation, a telegram thread that spikes during a cold snap to blame your energy bill on a recent diversification deal. The success of these campaigns does not depend on persuading everyone of one big lie. It rests on convincing enough people that nothing they see is reliable, that institutions cannot be trusted, that common purpose is naive. In this environment, even real grievances become accelerants. If you can guide the blame toward your preferred target, you alter policy without ever mentioning policy. Europe's vulnerabilities are not uniform, and that matters. In Central and Eastern Europe, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, the Baltic states, the fear of losing sovereignty is visceral, fueled by living memory. Their messages that hint at renewed domination can resonate quickly. In Western and Southern Europe, anxieties cluster around energy prices, migration management, and the reliability of social services. The same external actor can push different narratives in each place, fitted to the local idiom and history. The European Union faces a paradox at the core of this challenge. It is a normative power built to expand the space of rule of law, rights, and democratic conditionality. Yet since 2022, it has also had to move at speed on energy diversification, defense readiness, and industrial policy. Values talk hasn't vanished, but it now shares the stage with strategic necessity, and that creates a rhetorical opening. Critics can say, "You compromised your principles when they were inconvenient." That line, repeated often enough, erodes legitimacy even when policy choices were unavoidable. Energy and corridors are where influence work becomes concrete. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe scrambled to replace Russian hydrocarbons. Azerbaijan's role grew as a supplier and as part of the connective tissue of East West trade and transport. Whenever a regional actor's leverage increases, the information environment around that actor turns into contested terrain. If Azerbaijan's gas and transit relevance rise, one set of narratives will emphasize diversification, resilience, and bridging regions. Another will highlight instability risks, dependency swaps, or alleged Western manipulation. Anything that questions the sustainability or legitimacy of Azerbaijan EU ties. Meanwhile, within the South Caucasus itself, discourse can be pulled in both directions, shaped by domestic politics, diaspora media, and platform dynamics. The geopolitics are real. The parallel fight is over what the shift means and whom it empowers. To navigate this, it helps to separate roles. NATO remains Europe's cornerstone for hard security, deterrence, defense, interoperability, and the promise that tanks will not roll unchecked. Yet most influence operations target civilian space, media ecosystems, civic trust, elections, and the daily cohesion that makes policy governable. This is where the EU and member states can act more nimbly through platform regulation, election protection, media literacy, infrastructure hardening, and crisis communications. Think of it as a division of labor. NATO protects the perimeter and the sky. The EU strengthens the social immune system. When they work in tandem, the cost of influence operations rises. When they don't, adversaries can drive wedges, painting NATO as a foreign leash and the EU as hypocritical and weak. The extremes are designed to decrease trust, not to win an argument. Understanding the mechanics of a modern influence operation clarifies the countermeasures. The attackers start by mapping local fractures, energy costs, inflation, corruption rumors, culture war triggers. They seed content where scrutiny is weakest, fringe outlets, rebranded pages, diaspora channels, lightly moderated forums. They amplify using botnets and co opted influencers, translating messages into local dialects and humor. They connect the narrative to a policy outcome, vote against a coalition, oppose a pipeline, boycott a firm. They immunize themselves by preemptively alleging censorship, reframing accountability as an attack on free speech. And when they are debunked, they pivot to adjacent claims because erosion, not proof, is the goal. This is why social policy and fair, predictable institutions are not decorative. They are armor. Influence wilts where people feel seen, treated fairly, and served competently. Consider a composite but realistic episode from a Central European city. 2 weeks before a tight mayoral race, a local page posts a leaked memo claiming the frontrunner plans to settle large numbers of migrants in one neighborhood, depressing home values. The memo is forged, the page recently rebranded, the admin's offshore. Local talk radio lifts the story. A hashtag trends. The candidate spends precious days rebooting a ghost. Turnout dips in two precincts, and the margin is under 1%. Here, the countermeasures would have been straightforward, but require preparation. Pre-bunking, so citizens expect forged documents before they appear. A trusted human-voiced rumor control channel anchored in the electoral authority. Direct coordination with platforms for rapid escalation during election windows. None of that is glamorous, but it's what resilience looks like. Now consider an energy vignette. A cold snap drives prices up. Telegram channels insist that bills are high because the government sold out to a foreign supplier when it diversified away from Russian gas. The claim fuses a real pain point with a misleading cause, redirecting anger toward a geopolitical pivot designed to enhance resilience. The antidote is radical transparency, near real time dashboards on storage levels, flows, and the components of retail pricing. Plain language crisis scripts agreed in advance. Independent explainers that local media can quote without wading through jargon. When citizens can see the inputs, rumors have less oxygen. A third example plays out in diaspora media. A polished video channel begins with folk songs and cuisine, slowly introducing forgotten history that recasts a neighboring state as inherently hostile. Funding is undisclosed. Over time, the content nudges viewers toward protests against bridges, rail links, or joint energy ventures. The fix is not to ban culture, it's to insist on funding transparency for political content, to support media literacy in diaspora languages, and to back community leaders who can correct narratives without scolding audiences. Influence operations survive on performative outrage. They falter when trusted intermediaries calmly reframe. Regulation is essential, but blunt bans are a trap. Users route around prohibitions with VPNs, and bans can turn bad actors into martyrs. A smarter approach is co regulation. Governments set guardrails and auditing expectations. Platforms implement with clear reporting and real penalties for repeat manipulation. Political and issue advertising must disclose sponsors and intermediaries. Vetted researchers need data access to detect cross platform coordination. Election integrity pacts should formalize crisis protocols, ad freeze windows, and dedicated escalation paths. And none of this works without civic education that teaches skepticism without sliding into nihilism. The goal is not to produce citizens who believe nothing, but citizens who know how claims are constructed and how to evaluate them. This brings us to Turkey, not as a bridge cliche, but as a builder of practical arrangements. Geographically and economically, Turkey sits at the junction of Europe, the Black Sea, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. Every conversation about corridors, energy, logistics, digital touches Turkish interests and capabilities. Institutionally, Turkey is not visiting NATO. Turkey is NATO. On hybrid threats, it can contribute where the overlap between hard security and societal resilience is the thickest, securing infrastructure that is both physical and informational, bundling technology exports with resilience modules, and shaping corridor communications so ambiguity does not become a weapon. There is also a diplomatic template worth studying. The United Kingdom, now a third country to the EU, still plugs into European security through tailored agreements and project based cooperation. It shows that non membership need not mean irrelevance. Turkey can pursue issue based coalitions with Italy, Poland, Spain, and Germany to meet EU origin thresholds in defense supply chains, to co develop resilience tech, and to test joint exercises where cyber physical incidents are paired with influence surges. None of this requires rhetorical theatrics. It requires legal creativity, industrial pragmatism, and consistent political will on both sides. Political constraints exist and will persist. The EU's institutions pull in different directions. The Commission thinks in terms of strategic priorities and can be a partner for structured cooperation. The Parliament elevates values and will continue to critique. That is its nature and mandate. The Council expresses the calculus of member states, where bilateral relations and vetoes, think Greece and Cyprus, matter. The same is true on the Turkish side. Priorities shift with crises. Sanctions debates wax and wane. Public narratives harden. But the essential fact does not change. Security in Europe today is layered. It's military power, yes, but it's also infrastructure governance, platform behavior, municipal competence, and clear, steady public communication. In that layered reality, Turkey has a rational path to relevance and value creation, whether or not the EU accession file moves an inch. If we step back, the democratic playbook begins with humility and ends with routine. Map your fractures openly with an annual non-partisan review of social risks that treats polarization as a policy problem rather than a talking point. Speak to citizens before the forgeries arrive. Pre-bunking is faster than cleanup. Maintain a rumor control channel that sounds like a person, not a switchboard. Make energy transparent enough that price spikes become teachable moments. Fund open source monitoring hubs in universities and civil society that publish weekly briefs, not annual autopsies. Tie every major infrastructure or defense procurement to an influence resilience workstream so communications, stakeholder mapping, and community engagement are baked in, not stapled on at the end. Update civic education to focus on critical consumption rather than policing speech. Negotiate credible platform compacts that actually bite during election windows. Rehearse EU NATO choreography with joint exercises that practice the handoff from military incident response to civilian information management. And above all, deliver small visible wins in public service and anti corruption. Trust grows in increments. Influence operations wither where everyday fairness is visible. The takeaway is disarmingly simple. Influence operations are not primarily about convincing you to believe one dramatic falsehood. They are about wearing you down until you stop believing in each other. Europe's security story is changing. Supply chains rerouted, energy diversified, defense spending up, cooperation models evolving to include serious roles for non EU countries that build rather than sulk. The question is not whether adversaries will keep pushing into the seams of our societies. They will. The question is whether we can make those seams tighter by doing ordinary things well, governing transparently, coordinating institutions, communicating like adults, and investing where legitimacy actually lives in cities, in schools, in service counters, in the daily proof that rules apply and work. We are fond of speaking about NATO and the EU as if they live somewhere else, but they are our own arrangements, expressions of choices made repeatedly by governments we elect. If they feel distant, it's because we have let the distance widen. Close it. Ask for clarity. Reward competence. Expect less spectacle and more maintenance. In security, as in health, immunity is not a miracle, it's a regimen. Keep to it long enough, and the quiet war loses its payoff. Keep to it together, and the stories that aim to divide us lose their plot. This is what I think. What do you think? I appreciate your comments and questions via email or in the comments section. Feel free to subscribe and see you next time.